Tyrone Gethers Jr., your host of The Source of the Inkwell, live on KUAW, Knowledge, Understanding, and Wisdom. We are Kansas City's fastest growing community radio station. You can catch us on a number of ways. You can hit us up on Facebook, formerly known as Twitter, X, Twitch, YouTube, TuneIn Radio, and Roku, I believe, right? Yes, all you gotta do is type in KUAW Radio and we'll pop right up. Also, on some of those mods that I just said, you can actually see us too and interact live. Also, if you are within the 3-mile radius of the historic 18th and Vine area, you can turn us on your radio on the station of KOJH 100.5. So we're on your radio, on the airwaves, and on your internet, and on your screens. So we're very accessible. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, hit us up at 816-599-6893. So, it's good to be back in the Inkwell. I've been a little busy trying to do some transitioning pieces, but I wanted to kind of address a few things. With being an educator, I am aware that a typical classroom setting is like a family photo. And I've said this before. And in that family photo, everybody wants to be represented. However, if someone does not see that they're not represented within that photo, then they react in a manner to remind you that they were missed. And that's how students are in the classroom. In an ideal classroom, you have students who are of different cultures, races, genders, sexual orientations, religions, and all that. Our differences make us special, or our differences make us unique. And sometimes you can find similarities within our differences too. That's in an ideal classroom. However, there's this thing called institutionalized racism that puts a fog lens on that. And a lot of students are neglected because of all of those previously mentioned items in regards to our students. Now, when it comes down to that, being an African-American male, I've noticed that our students are underrepresented and underappreciated in our classroom settings. You can have a school building, even a school district, with the majority of African-Americans in that building, and you don't see any representation or any acknowledgement of who they are and their cultures. And it's not just for children of African descent, but also children of color as well too. Now, our children are starving and they are neglected. I mean, it's a shame. It's to the point to where Child Protective Services should be called on a lot of these schools because they are not being nourished with their culture. And you're probably saying, well, Tyrone, you're going pretty hard on education. Well, I can do that. I've been teaching for over 20 plus years. And even if I was teaching for 20 minutes, an observation is an observation. I've been in a few school settings, and when you mention Black history, you hear, oh, we don't do that here, or this is something that we don't do. Well, I'm going to speak on a recent occurrence. I was in a school setting, and while I was there, I noticed that one particular teacher, she made a push for African American history. Now, keep in mind, there are other nationalities. However, in this school building, I would say about 90% of your students is of African descent. And I would also say about a good chunk of your staff is of African descent as well, too. So, back to being on point. If you notice, I like to go on little rabbit trails every now and then. Going on, back to getting on point. We're saying that she came up with the initiative to do this wonderful push for African American history, Black history. And this teacher or this staff member said, "Hey, look, let's do a spirit week. Let's do a bulletin board. Let's have staff wear their colors and pro-Black and pro-Afrocentric clothing and slogans and everything." So I noticed. I'm gonna just say it. When it comes to celebrating Black history in schools, white teachers act as if they're afraid of the dark. I'm gonna say it again. You all. I mean, I noticed that there's a fear or a, oh, I can't do that when it comes to Black history. But all throughout the year, you blast our music. You support Black celebrities. The whole pop culture type stuff. But when it comes to Black empowerment, you all think it's anti-white. And I'm going to quote Bobby Seale. We're not anti-white, we're anti-oppression. And what better way to align yourself with your students than to introduce their culture to them, or say, hey, look, I give a darn, and Mr. Ward, I can't say the D word on the radio, can I? That you give a darn about their culture. And students are seeing that. Now, and it's starting to become repulsive. Because my thing is, you can sit up and hear Black children call each other the N-word, but you don't stop them and tell them why they shouldn't say it. And that's the problem that I have. So, yet again, another rabbit trail. Let me get back on target. I noticed that when a lot of Black teachers, well, I shouldn't say a lot, a few Black teachers were wearing either kente cloth or pro-Black messages on their clothing, a lot of white teachers gave side-eye and made uncomfortable looks and comments. Now, I know what's going on in their minds. I remember a white teacher came to me years ago and she told me, Tyrone, I was wearing a shirt, the one that says "Dream like Martin, fight like Harriet," that particular shirt. She said a white teacher pulled her aside and said, "Why are you wearing that stuff? This is not this month isn't for you. It's for them." I said, "No, that teacher got it the other way around. She got it wrong. This month is for you. I would say you need education as much as anybody else in regards to Black history." And the fact that teacher said that proves my point. So with saying that, I noticed that. And I noticed that when I was doing a Black history trivia, I noticed that a lot of the teachers in that building was like, well, I'm not really wanting to fool with this. Or I would get I would get looks, or I kind of get the kind of, the little window shop look where people would walk by and kind of look and glance and then keep moving. That's what it was. We're not noticing any administration for real doing a strong push. You see an email or two, but you don't see administration participating. You don't see teachers or staff really getting their kids involved. You're seeing a handful, but you're not really seeing it. So today, a comment was made. It was a conversation between two teachers that was brought to my attention. And keep in mind, with me being in education and with me being having a show that is rooted in education, schools and teachers and school personnel and parents and students reach out to me on the regular, telling me a lot of information about tons of schools around the area. So I will not share the name of the school, nor the personnel in the school or the individuals that gave me the information. But I think what I'm talking about is prevalent in most schools, if not all, if that makes sense. So, the conversation was teacher A. Hey, I noticed that there's not a huge push for participation for Black History Month in this building. Note, teacher A, Black male. Teacher B, a female teacher who identifies as white. Well, I didn't get the information for Spirit Week until on Thursday and made the face of, well, teacher A, that's not an excuse. It doesn't take Spirit Week for people to get up and do things. Teacher B, well, I grew up in Black culture and I know what is, things about, Black history. I was taught that when I was younger. Teacher A, what they got to do with now, though? What are you doing right now? Teacher B, well, I woke up and I saw that it was dressed as, a Black celebrity or Black influential person. which I kind of, and I was gonna dress like a teacher in this building, but I didn't do it. So I decided to put on the outfit that I have on now. It has, black colors in it. Teacher A. And that's the problem. You think that's okay. Students need to be educated on what's going on. This school needs to instill in these students culture. And that's the problem. So before the conversation got any heated, administrator came in, tapped teacher A on the shoulder, and said, can you go and help me with this situation? Of course, this administrator was African American as well, and the teacher A discussed the situation with the administrator, and she felt them. Later on, teacher A was in a room discussing Black history with students. The same teacher B from earlier came in and said, hey, you're very knowledgeable. Why don't you go and do little mini lessons in every class? Teacher A, it's not my responsibility to educate everyone and do their job for them. Every teacher has a responsibility to acknowledge the cultures of all their students. If I can sit down with students and discuss Black history with these students, you, as well as every other teacher in the school building, should be able to do the exact same thing. Teacher A established a problem that's going on in many schools across this nation. When it comes to dealing with matters with Black children, white teachers are quick, for the most part, are quick to put that job on the sole Black person in that school building. And that's not okay. That is not okay. Let's go a little bit further. Teacher A, same teacher, was sitting in the hallway. Teacher C, who's white male, comes to him and says, hey, I like your attire that you're wearing. Two students walk by and began to make fun of the teacher A's attire. Teacher B says, well, I still think it's cool, and you need to say something to those students in regards to your attire. Teacher A, why can't you teach those students? They're yours. That's the problem. We're so quick to pass responsibility. I mean, what's the fear? Why are teachers who do not identify as Black or African American afraid to teach kids Black history? And that's the problem. There's so many excuses. I mean, this teacher told me, he said, hey, Tyrone, it is sad. I mean, they just turn they turn their nose up, have a blind eye and a deaf ear when it comes to teaching history to these kids. He said, and sir, it wasn't just Black history. It was Hispanic history. And we have a lot of Hispanic students in our school building. Native American history, Asian American history was like that. It was sad. But when it comes to everything else, it's an issue. I mean, we discussed that. When it comes to stereotypes, it's an issue. We talk about the stereotypes. We glorify that. We talk about how the teachers discuss how they perceive students in their minds. And it's sad. That you don't even see the building leader standing behind this push in regards to these students. But when it comes time to bringing a DJ to the school, or when it comes time to talking about something stereotypical, they're all for that. But when it comes to the push of the culture of these students, they keep their mouths shut. And these kids are suffering, but it's okay. They make it permissible for little boys to call girls the B word, and for kids to refer to each other as N words. I mean, and to be quite honest, this teacher said, I've heard more than just the N word that these kids call each other. And they think it's okay, and these teachers hear it and they don't correct it. And teachers, especially white teachers, when you hear kids refer to each other as the N word and you say nothing and you don't correct it, what you're doing is you're making it permissible for kids to say that. And you're also letting those kids know that's how you see them. My mother and father used to always tell me, if I keep my mouth shut, I don't love you. If I say something, that shows that I do. You don't love those students. You view them as that word that they're using. You don't value them. If you value those students, you encourage them to do research about themselves and where they come from. You also go into the research with them and you educate. You're not doing that. Now, shout out to those teachers that are being involved. And first of all, it's a shame that we pick 1 month out of the year, the smallest month out of the year, to teach the history of students. So you mean to tell me that your school building is 90% black and you only pick 1 month to teach? No, this needs to be going on 365. Not to be a cliche. You have those children of different races in your classroom all school year. They need to feel a part of your classroom and your curriculum and your school culture all school year. And I think it is a shame. It is sinful and depraved that building leadership is not behind that. You want those kids sitting in those seats every day to get that money from the state, but you don't value those children there. You don't invest in the kids that are there. You don't. You think it's okay for these kids to be stereotypes. And that's the problem. We have school systems now that value kids as stereotypes and not students. And that's the problem. And it's evident. We make excuses on why we shouldn't do it. We think it's fearful. It's okay to lay down with a black man, but you can't lay a book down about the history of that black man for those black children. And that's the issue. And that's the issue. If there are any school administrators who are watching this broadcast right now, please contact me, because I want to know what you're doing in your school to push forth equability in your curriculum of culture. I don't see it. It's not across the board. When you ignore things, you hope that it goes away. See, you walk around with these signs on your car saying Black Lives Matter, but you are afraid of the individuals that gave life to those black kids in your classroom. We have school districts right now that are, well, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and just say it. There's school districts right now that are so crime-ridden. You got drugs. You got inappropriate sexual behavior. You have guns. You have violence. You have disrespect. You have so much of that going on in your school. You make it part of the culture. And, I remember I sat down with an administrator. He was a white man. And I asked him, I said, hey, man, look at this school building. It's dirty. It's disgusting. It's falling apart. If we took this school and took it out of this zip code and put it into another zip code, would we still have those same problems? He laughed and said, nope. And I said, and the fact that you laughed and agreed, that's the problem. School segregation was voted on back in the 80s. Remember that, Mr. Walker? School segregation in the 80s? And when they made schools, the desegregation of schools. Oh. Yes. Yeah, Yeah, school segregation still exists. That vote didn't do anything. School segregation still exists based on the zip code. That zip code establishes a lot. And if you don't believe me, look at your schools right now. Look at your schools now. Look at schools in the zip code of the Kansas City, Missouri School District. Now, remember when the Kansas City, Missouri School District lost its accreditation? And the surrounding school districts flat out said, nope, we don't want those kids here. They said that. I remember one particular school district right down the road, right next door, put on their website they didn't want Kansas City, Missouri school district kids. I remember another school district, there was 2 districts over, out south, southwest, southeast, stated, yeah, no. They sat there and followed black kids home to make sure they stayed in district. And then on their actual website, they stated, well, yeah, one guy made a comment, he said, yeah, when those kids came here, everything dropped. Those kids. And if you want to know, that was the same school district that hired a superintendent that wanted to do change for diversity, and they got rid of him. And that's the issue. So we have a problem here. And the problem is the same problem we had as children. I'm 2 years old. Mommy comes in, kisses me on the forehead, tucks me in, and before she leaves, she turns the nightlight on. Why? Because little TJ was afraid of the dark. And that little light gave me hope that everything was going to be okay. That's the issue going on right now in schools. You got school leaders, you got parents, teachers, and politicians afraid of the dark. They're afraid of black children. They're afraid of the unknown, with what school's going to look like with these black children there. All of that. And that little light is hope that maybe this light will get big enough to eradicate all of this darkness with these children coming in here. And it's true. Come on now. How many times have you sat up here and you saw a little black kid wanting to go to another school that was predominantly white, and if they weren't an athlete, they didn't want them there? And how many times have you heard of black children living with white coaches in order for them to go to school in other areas? That goes on to this day. And black people, instead of taking our children out of the black community for a better education, why don't we hold the people accountable in our community that sits in those elected positions? In a public school setting, you have the right to vote who you want. We have school boards where we have people who've done crimes sitting on your school boards, who say inappropriate things to kids, who have shady past, who abuse their power, who makes the front page of the news. Now, I know I mentioned that there are individuals who are not African American who violate our kids. But you know what? My parents used to always say this too. Mr. Walker, you know this one. All skin folk ain't kinfolk. Just because somebody looks like you does not mean that they hold the same values as you. There are people, as soon as they get your vote, the mask comes off. I'll be real. Kamala Harris, main one, is an example. But we're not going to go there. Let's talk about our home situation. You got people that, you know what? I remember I told my students one time, I said, you need to know who your board president is and who your superintendent is. And if you don't know that, that's a problem. You got parents who don't know who the superintendent is of their schools, their kids' schools. I remember hearing of parents calling and saying, does my kid go to this school? They don't know who their board members are. You got board members who will sit up here and tell you, yes, we do what we do because the parents don't know who we are and what we do. Come on now. Parents, in a public school setting, I'm not talking about charter, a public school district, do you know you can actually be a board member? Yes, you, sir, who is sitting there right now watching this show, you can be the board president of your kid's school district. Yes, ma'am, you who's listening to this show right now in her car, riding around 18th and Vine. You are upset with how your schools, your child's school is handling safety. Guess what? You can run for school board. You can. and get elected. I'd rather parents, I'd rather you all get elected than you all not doing something and allowing someone to get selected to make choices for your child. And guess what? A lot of these school districts, you got people sitting on your board who had kids in your district decades ago. They can't relate. Or people who don't have kids in your district. They can't relate. I've seen board members who barely, and I'm not talking about them, but they're barely literate, who are sitting up here reading, who can't even read the policy and understand the policy. And they're the board president? Come on, y'all. Y'all gotta wake up. You gotta wake up. Let me ask you a question. What is your most prized possession? Your most prized possession should be your child. It should be. It's mine. My little 8-year-old boy is my most prized possession. He is. Now let me ask you a question. Would you allow a dog to watch your child? Would you allow a rock to watch your child? Would you allow a figment of your imagination to watch your child? That's what you're doing. You're entrusting your children with entities that you don't even know. You don't know their policies, their platforms. You know, that same energy, parents, and I'm being real. As a parent, it's on me too. That same energy you have to go to your kid's game, you need to have that same energy talking to your kid's teacher. That same energy that you have complaining against a school policy that's really adequate. For example, why can't my kid have their phone out? That's minute. What about, why is this superintendent making all this money and these schools don't got no air conditioner? You mad at a teacher and you cussing this teacher out because this teacher said, no, your child cannot be in my classroom cursing me out. Take that same energy and hold their board accountable for guns being in your school and they're not doing nothing. Mr. Walker, do you know that there's been times where there's been loaded guns in schools and the parents don't know about it? Could you imagine if I was your child and you found out there was a loaded gun or someone selling dope in the school months after it happened? That's the issue. Communication is the foundation of any relationship. Any relationship. It's the foundation. And there is a law, parents. It's a law that when your kid is dropped off in that school, the parental advisement, the parental covering passes from you to us. You know, my pops made a good point. And you know, my thing is this. I may not always agree with my parents, but woo, man, they said some gems. I had a problem in school, Southwest High School. I'm talking about me, Southwest High School. And my dad made a point. He said, TJ, let me ask you a question. Do you know if your teachers have any kids? I said, I'm sure they do. He said, well, son, this is what I want you to do. I want you to ask your teachers. He said, and be respectful. Ask them, do you have children? Would you allow your children to be in this school? And if the answer is no, don't fool with that teacher. And I'm like, wow, blew my mind. He said, why would a teacher teach in a school building or in a school district where they won't want their kids there? Now, if that teacher says, well, I want to make a change, or if, you know, I'm making policy change, that's different. But they just sitting there saying, no, my kid won't get here. And they're part of the problem. Don't, you know, no. And I took that to heart when I started teaching. And throughout my 21 years of teaching, I've seen that. I've seen teachers not care about these kids. Last time I checked, I don't care if you can't stand the kid. If that kid's in your classroom, that kid's your responsibility. It's that simple. I mean, I've had kids I didn't like, but you know what? I told them, you stay from my classroom. Man, I'm telling y'all, Malcolm said it best. We're letting our enemies teach our kids. We are. Our enemies are teaching our kids. And guess what, parents? The way your kids are at home, when they come to schools, you have teachers that allow your kids to do opposite of what you teach and then turn around and say it was your fault. You know why I say that? Because these are the same teachers. Now, of course, there are some kids that, it is a home issue. But for the most part, these are the same teachers that when your kid is doing something, they don't call you. Your kid said this and did that, and they didn't call you to discuss it. Because I know for a fact, if they called you and said, your son said this and your daughter did that, you check it. But you know why they ain't saying nothing? Because they think that's how that kid is. They think that kid don't come from a home with structure. They treat your kids like animals, people. They do. Come on now. You got 13, 14-year-olds got to walk in lines. Walk in lines? No. No. I sat there and saw this. I hope y'all watching. I saw this in the school. Security officers, police officers walking around doing this, tapping their pistols around kids. Around kids. I saw this one time. Now this is doing a Black History program. There was a Black History program, and I saw a security officer like this. You watching? This is mace, a canister of mace, waiting for something to pop off. I said, dang, are you serious? See, I'm under this impression that when a group of us assembles together, it makes people who don't look like us nervous. I've experienced that. If myself, Mr. Walker, Professor Smooth Jazz, and T.L. Williams are sitting down having a conversation, and someone who don't look like us walk by, they feel threatened by that. People, you shouldn't feel threatened by that. I was always told if you feel threatened by something like that, you have guilt. You got microaggressions. Something wrong with you, not us. We're talking about the game. Think about the black people. Have you ever sat at work and it's like a group of y'all sitting there talking and someone who is not African American or someone who identifies as a colonizer walks by and they see you talking to each other and they either A, do this, trying to see what you're talking about, or B, interject as if they were part of your conversation, or C, try to go and tell on you and say that you've been, all three of those have happened to me one time. Matter of fact, all three of those happened to me in one day. I said, are you serious? I can't sit and talk to someone about the game at work? So, you have all this going on in schools. And parents, teachers, students, I want you all to listen. Go back to what I was saying about zip codes. And go back to what I was saying about how school segregation still occurs based on the zip code. Think about urban schools and suburban schools. In urban schools, your kids are taught. In suburban schools, your kids are educated. See the difference? In urban schools, your kids are told to get a job. In suburban schools, they're told to get a career. Let's go back to the word job. You know what job stands for? It's a backronym for just over broke. In urban schools, your kid is taught to be the employee. In suburban schools, your kids are taught to be the employer. In urban schools, your kids are policed. In suburban schools, your kids are made secure. See the difference here? Huge difference. If you don't believe me, I want you to go to a suburban school and go to an urban school. And for the most part, you're going to see a huge difference. A huge difference. Now, let's go to black male teachers. I like to consider myself very intelligent. I'm not being arrogant. One, I love myself to acknowledge the fact that I am intelligent. And two, my peers tell me that, and my students have told me that. So I've noticed that when I go to schools where I am the only one of me, I'm always put through a test. And I have a quote that I always say: having to prove yourself is an insult. I've had to prove how intelligent I was all my life, and especially as a teacher. I'm a black man teaching English. And when I sit and I talk to especially white female teachers, and I say, hey, I teach English, I get these looks. Like today, I mentioned that I wrote a book. And, oh, really? Like, it's one thing to say, oh, really? And it's like, oh, really? Like, I'm like, dang. I mean, matter of fact, one of the books I wrote is inducted in the Black Archives. And they're like, it's like they're shocked. And I'm like, no, I'm pretty good with a pen and paper. So, when I hear stuff like that, it's like, dude, I work in the same profession as you. Now, Mr. Walker, it's a good thing you're sitting down right there. I worked in one school setting, and I had a white teacher come to me and tell me, this is what she said. She said, Tyrone, how much do you make? And I said, I'm not going to discuss that. Well, how much do you make? I said, I'm not going to discuss that with you. She said, well, I'm going to tell you this. And she said, this white male teacher's name has been working in our district so long. And if he found out you came in this district and you're making more than him, it'll make him cry. And in my mind, I'm like, well, hell, he need to be boo-hooing. because for one, I'm not going to share that. And the fact that she would say that to me, I'm like, dang. That this black man should not make as much as a white person. And this is the same white woman that I told you all about a year ago, who told a black student, you need to learn the ways of the white man in this school building and act accordingly. She said that. And I remember I did break protocol, and I said the woman's name, and I said what school she was in and what district she was in. Now, I'm not going to do that now. But yeah, I'm like, are you serious? It's the same woman that said that. So, you got people that think that. And throughout the past, 10 years I've been through, I would have white teachers kind of some way subtly ask or inquire how much I was making. Like, this boy shouldn't be making this money. Now, I remember I had a supervisor years ago before I started teaching. Matter of fact, it was Miss Natasha Rhea. And I keep bringing her up because she's one of my inspirations in teaching. I love her for this. And for writing, too, her and Glenn North. But anyway, she said, Tyrone, she said, the way you dress is like a blend between hip-hop and prep. You blend those very well. And I said, well, thank you. And sometimes I, teeter-totter on the sides. So every now and then I walk up in there wearing a pair of Jordans. Or I rep one of my favorite clothing lines, locally owned, deep-rooted. I got a lot of deep-rooted clothing. I wear a lot of that at work. Because one, Don is a cool brother, and two, I like what he wears. I like what he makes, and I look good wearing it. And it feels good supporting someone that you know. Like I said earlier, another rabbit trail. A lot of my favorite things in town are people I know. So I rock my friend's stuff. But anyway, when I see teachers look at me sometimes, and I'm wearing, something like, I wore this to work today, something like this, or they treat me as if I'm a boy and not a man, or they try to. Nope, they try, but they get shut down. But then you say, well, Tyrone, why don't you dress professional? Oh, I do. I will come in there wearing a shirt and tie, or slacks, even a suit. And first thing they say, why you dressed up? You got a job interview? I remember one time I was at a job, and I was looking nice, and they said that I was going to quit my job, and I got, they try to put red in my ledger. So you mean to tell me I'm getting popped for wearing a suit to work? I'm being professional. Shout out to Westport Middle School. Those teachers had a high standard on how you dress. And back then, it was shirt and tie, slacks, all that. Now, you wear just about anything. And my thing is, so you looking at me and making comments that, I'm just like a teenager, but you have women who are wearing yoga pants, and we all know that certain yoga pants accentuate certain, let's just be real here. And you're not saying nothing about that? Or you have guys who wear t-shirt and jeans, or people wearing flip-flops. You don't say none of them, but you say stuff to the brother who's wearing an Afrocentric piece of jewelry, or a Black Pride shirt, or a Negro League jacket. You know what I'm saying? Or a pair of Jordans. I don't get that. But when our white counterparts dress like that, it's okay. I noticed something else too. Let's talk about equity, inclusion, and diversity. When it comes to that, have you noticed that for the most part, if you are a black male, you more than likely won't get that position or be able to talk about that kind of stuff? But like your white counterparts do, predominantly your white female counterparts? That's a problem. So I can't talk about my progression or how I feel I should be represented in this company, but it's okay for a white woman to say that about me? Now, no, I'm not saying that white people don't know that. I'm just saying that when we are constantly passed over with stuff like that, that's a problem. Which all goes back to your child. Parents in these schools, you need to hold these schools accountable. Representation matters. Your child needs to see people who look like them or who care about who they look like or what they look like in schools. Now, note, I'm not saying all black kids need black teachers. No, there are a lot of white people out there that love our kids. I've worked with some who love our kids as if they're their own. And there are two that I can think of right now off the top of my head. I'm going to go ahead and give them a shout out. One of them is Miss Aubrey Pribno, and I'm not going to say what school she's with, but I do want to give her a shout out because that young lady makes black children feel comfortable. She actually implements herself in their families. I will say that. She cares about her black students. Another guy I used to work with, Jason Green, same thing. He loves his black students. I remember there was a funeral of a student who passed away. And that brother sat there and gave love to that family and wept as if that child was his. So, I mean, you have teachers out there that love all kids. And school officials, you need to hire teachers like that. Hire teachers that love every kid up in their classroom. And they don't differentiate on where a kid is from or who their parents are or what they look like. They give a you-know-what about every child in that classroom. Now, what I'm saying, it may be controversial. It's only controversial because I'm saying what needs to be said. There's an accountability piece going on, and schools have been dropping the ball with educating children in regards to culture. Schools have been dropping the ball with putting people in place that care about every aspect of a child holistically. Teachers have been dropping the ball about saying, hey, this is not okay. I want every color, every race, every religion in my classroom to be accepted. Parents have been dropping the ball because we, as parents, don't hold those elected officials accountable to the point to where they become selected officials. And they put individuals in your community who is not from your community making policy about children in your community that they did not give birth to or parent to. Yeah, I said it. Students, You dropped the ball because guess what? You're not going outside of the walls of your classroom and challenging yourself to get to know who you are. Because that beautiful black man, that beautiful black woman that you see in the mirror daily, you don't feed that intellect in knowing who you can be and where you came from. You feed the impulses of where someone who don't give a you know what about you told you who you should be. And that's the problem. This is a wake-up call for all of us because the accountability falls on everyone's shoulders, even mine. As a teacher and as a parent, I'm not exempt either. So, like I said earlier, your child's school, your child's classroom is a family photo. Is your child being represented? And if they're not, what are you doing to get that photo to be retaken? I'm Tyrone Gethers Jr., and this is the Source of the Inkwell. In the Inkwell, education overflows like ink. And like ink, let it stain permanent. I'll see you next week. God bless.